Someone is living in your mind, paying no rent, controlling your peace. The real question is, why did you let them in? There is a strange and often unnoticed phenomenon that happens quietly within us. It does not knock on the door. It does not announce its arrival. Yet somehow it settles deep inside the mind and begins to take up space without permission. Someone enters your life, perhaps briefly, perhaps intensely. They may have spoken words that linger, created emotions that felt rare, or awakened something within you that had long been dormant. And even after they are gone, even after the connection fades in reality, something of them remains, not in your surroundings, but in your thoughts. You find yourself revisiting moments that no longer exist. Conversations replay themselves in different versions, as if your mind is trying to rewrite what has already been written. You imagine scenarios that never happened, responses you wish you had given, outcomes that could have been different. And slowly, without realizing it, your inner world begins to revolve around someone who is no longer truly present in your life. This is how the mind becomes occupied. But this occupation is invisible. There are no visible chains, no physical barriers. On the outside, everything appears normal. You go about your day, you interact with others, you fulfill your responsibilities. Yet internally, there is a constant return, a silent pull that keeps bringing you back to the same person, the same memories, the same emotional loops. What makes this even more complex is that it often feels justified. You tell yourself it matters because the connection felt real, because what you experienced was intense, because something about it touched you in a way that ordinary experiences do not. And so the mind begins to protect it, to preserve it, to keep it alive. But the mind does not simply preserve, it expands. A single moment becomes a story. A brief connection becomes something symbolic. The person themselves transforms into more than who they actually were. They become a representation of something deeper, a feeling, a need, a part of yourself that was activated in their presence. And this is where the occupation deepens, because now it is no longer just about them. It is about what they came to mean inside you. Perhaps they represented acceptance or understanding or a sense of belonging that you rarely felt elsewhere. Perhaps they mirrored a version of you that felt more alive, more confident, more complete. So your mind keeps returning, not necessarily to them as a person, but to what they unlocked within you. And the more you return, the stronger the presence becomes. This is not a conscious decision, it happens automatically. The mind follows what feels significant, what feels unresolved, what feels emotionally charged. It circles around it again and again, as if trying to extract meaning or closure. But instead of resolution, it often creates repetition. The same thoughts, the same feelings, the same mental patterns. Over time, this repetition begins to shape your inner environment. Your focus narrows. Your awareness becomes tied to something that exists more in memory than in reality. And without noticing, your mental energy becomes invested in maintaining something that no longer exists in the external world. This is the subtle cost of invisible occupation. It does not demand your attention loudly. It takes it quietly. It redirects your energy inward, but not toward growth, toward fixation. It keeps parts of you anchored in the past, even as time continues to move forward, and because it is internal, it is easy to overlook, easy to justify, easy to confuse with care or depth or emotional significance. But beneath it all, there is a deeper movement taking place. one that is less about the other person and more about the spaces within you that remain unexamined, the emotions that remain unresolved, and the parts of your identity that became entangled in the experience itself. Missing someone is human, but replaying them endlessly in your mind. That's not love, that's captivity. There is a delicate line between attachment and obsession, and most people do not realize when they have crossed it. Both can feel intense. Both can feel meaningful. Both can convince you that what you are experiencing is deep and significant. But beneath the surface, they are fundamentally different forces moving in opposite directions. Attachment is natural. It is part of being human. You connect with someone, you share moments, emotions are exchanged, and a bond forms. There is warmth in it, a sense of familiarity, a quiet comfort in knowing someone matters to you and you matter to them. Attachment allows space. It does not suffocate your thoughts or consume your identity. It exists alongside your life, not in place of it. Obsession, however, does not allow that space. It begins subtly, almost indistinguishable from attachment. You think about the person often. You replay moments, analyze conversations, anticipate interactions. At first, it feels like care. It feels like depth. It feels like you are simply invested. But gradually, the thinking becomes constant. The person is no longer just a part of your mind, they begin to dominate it. Where attachment flows, obsession fixates. Attachment allows you to live your life while holding someone in your heart. Obsession pulls you out of your life and traps you inside your mind. Your thoughts begin to orbit around them, not occasionally, but repeatedly, almost compulsively. You find yourself returning to the same memories, the same questions, the same imagined scenarios, as if your mind is stuck in a loop it cannot escape. The difference becomes clearer in how it affects your sense of self. With attachment, you remain grounded in who you are. You still have your own direction, your own thoughts, your own sense of identity. The other person adds to your experience, but do not define it. You can step away mentally, shift your focus, and return to yourself without feeling lost. With obsession, that grounding begins to erode. Your sense of self starts to revolve around the other person. Their actions, their words, even their absence begins to influence your emotional state. You may find yourself questioning your worth based on how they treated you or how they made you feel. Your inner stability becomes dependent on something outside of your control, and this creates a constant tension within you. Obsession feeds on uncertainty. It thrives in the unknown, in the unanswered, in the incomplete. The less clarity you have, the more your mind tries to fill the gaps. It creates stories, assumptions, possibilities, and each one pulls you deeper into the cycle. You are no longer experiencing the person as they are. You are interacting with a version of them constructed by your own thoughts. Attachment, on the other hand, does not need constant mental engagement to survive. It can exist quietly, without demanding your attention every moment. It respects reality. It accepts what is, rather than trying to recreate what could have been. There is a certain calmness in it, even when emotions are strong. Obsession is restless. It seeks resolution, but rarely finds it. It searches for answers in places where there are none, and in doing so, it keeps the mind active, engaged, and trapped. The more you think, the more you feel compelled to think again. It becomes a pattern, a habit of returning to the same mental space, even when it brings discomfort. One of the most revealing differences lies in freedom. Attachment allows you to let go, even if it is difficult. It recognizes that connection does not mean possession, and that meaning does not require permanence. There is an understanding, even if unspoken, that you can carry the experience without being controlled by it. Obsession resists letting go. It clings, not because the connection still exists in reality, but because it continues to exist in the mind. It holds on to the idea, the feeling, the possibility, and refuses to release it. Letting go feels like losing something essential, even if what you are holding on to is no longer real in the present. And so, what once felt like connection slowly transforms into captivity, where your thoughts are no longer your own, and your inner world becomes centered around someone who may no longer even be part of your life in any tangible way. You're not thinking about them. You're thinking about the version of yourself you became around them. There is a powerful psychological mechanism that operates quietly beneath your awareness, shaping how you see others without you even realizing it. It does not announce itself, yet it influences your emotions, your attachments, and the meanings you assign to people. This mechanism is projection. When someone occupies your mind intensely, it often feels as though they hold a unique power over you. You may believe there is something extraordinary about them, something rare, something deeply significant that explains why they affect you the way they do. But what if the intensity you feel is not entirely coming from them? What if a large part of it is coming from you? Projection occurs when you unconsciously attribute your own inner thoughts, desires, fears, and unresolved emotions onto another person. Instead of recognizing these elements as part of your own inner world, you see them reflected in someone else. They appear to embody qualities that, in reality, originate within you. This is why certain people feel magnetic. It is not always because of who they truly are, but because of what they represent to you. They become a mirror, reflecting parts of yourself that you may not fully understand or have not yet accepted. These reflections can be positive, such as confidence, strength, or a sense of completeness, or they can be tied to wounds, insecurities, and unmet needs. And because these parts are unconscious, you do not recognize them as your own. Instead, you experience them as something external, something belonging to the other person. You begin to believe that they are the source of what you feel, when in reality, they are simply the surface onto which your inner world is being projected. This creates a powerful illusion. You may find yourself thinking that they are the only person who could make you feel this way, that there is something uniquely special about them that cannot be replaced. That losing them means losing a part of yourself. But what you are actually responding to is not just them. It is the meaning you have assigned to them through your own psyche. Projection amplifies perception. It takes a fragment of reality and builds an entire narrative around it. A simple interaction becomes deeply symbolic. A few shared moments become emotionally loaded. You begin to see depth, intention, and significance that may not fully exist in the way you perceive it. And because the experience feels real, it becomes convincing. You invest emotionally, mentally, and sometimes even spiritually into this constructed image. The person becomes more than who they are. They become who your mind needs them to be. They carry qualities, roles, and meanings that go far beyond their actual presence in your life. This is why letting go feels so difficult. Because you are not just letting go of a person, You are letting go of the projection. You are letting go of the version of yourself that you saw through them. You are releasing the qualities, the emotions, the identity that felt activated in their presence. And that can feel like losing something deeply personal. But the truth is, what you saw in them was never truly theirs to begin with. It was yours. The confidence you admired, the connection you felt, the sense of completeness you experienced, these were reflections of your own inner world. They were parts of you that surfaced through the interaction, not gifts that belonged exclusively to the other person. Projection creates dependency, because if you believe those qualities exist only in them, you will feel incomplete without them. You will feel as though something essential is missing, something that cannot be accessed on your own. This belief keeps you mentally tied to them, even when they are no longer present in your life. But once you begin to recognize projection, something shifts. You start to see that the intensity you feel is not proof of their uniqueness, but evidence of your own depth. You begin to understand that what affected you so strongly was not just who they were, but what they awakened within you. And in that realization, the focus slowly turns inward. The question is no longer, why do they have this effect on me? But what inside me is being expressed through this experience? There is a price you pay when your mind becomes fixated on someone, and it is rarely obvious at first. It does not arrive as a sudden loss or a dramatic shift. Instead, it unfolds slowly, almost invisibly, as your attention begins to narrow and your inner world becomes increasingly centered around a single point. Mental fixation begins as repeated thought. You revisit moments, replay conversations, analyze meanings, and search for clarity that never quite arrives. At first, it feels like you are trying to understand something important, something worth examining. But over time, this process stops being productive and starts becoming cyclical. You are no longer gaining insight. You are repeating patterns. The same questions appear again and again. Why did it happen this way? What did they really mean? Could it have been different? And even when you think you have reached an answer, the mind returns to the beginning as if unsatisfied, as if something essential is still missing. This is where the cost begins to accumulate. Your attention, which is one of your most valuable resources, becomes tied to something that no longer exists in your present reality. Instead of being directed toward growth, creativity, or awareness, it becomes trapped in analysis and repetition. You are mentally active, but not moving forward. This creates a subtle form of exhaustion, not the kind that comes from physical effort, but the kind that comes from constant internal activity without resolution. Your mind is always engaged, always processing, always returning to the same point. Even in moments of silence, there is no real rest because the fixation continues beneath the surface. And with this exhaustion comes a loss of clarity. When your thoughts revolve around one person or one experience, your perspective begins to narrow. You start to interpret other areas of your life through the lens of this fixation. Your emotions become influenced by it, your decisions shaped by it, your sense of reality subtly distorted by it. You may begin to withdraw without realizing it, not necessarily from people, but from presence. Your body remains in the moment, but your mind drifts elsewhere. The conversations lose depth because part of your attention is occupied. Opportunities pass unnoticed because your focus is turned inward, but not in a way that brings awareness, rather in a way that reinforces repetition. This is the hidden cost, disconnection from your own life. While your mind is engaged with the past or with imagined scenarios, the present continues to unfold without your full participation. Moments that could have meaning remain unexperienced. Growth that requires attention remains delayed. You are physically present, but mentally elsewhere. Over time, this creates stagnation. Not because you lack potential, but because your energy is being invested in something that does not evolve. Fixation keeps you tied to what has already happened, preventing you from fully engaging with what is happening now. It creates a loop where the past is constantly revisited, but never truly resolved. Another cost is the gradual erosion of emotional balance. When your thoughts are repeatedly directed toward a single subject, your emotional state becomes dependent on it. If the thoughts are painful, you relive that pain. If they are confusing, you remain in confusion. If they are unresolved, you carry that sense of incompleteness with you. Your inner stability becomes fragile because it is no longer grounded in the present moment, but in a mental construct that shifts depending on how you think about it. A single memory can alter your mood. A single imagined scenario can influence your entire day. And yet, the fixation continues, often unnoticed as the source of this instability. It disguises itself as importance, as depth, as something that must be figured out before you can move on. But in reality, it is not leading you toward resolution. It is keeping you engaged in a process that feeds on itself. The longer it continues, the more it shapes your inner world. Your thoughts become patterned. Your emotional responses become predictable. Your awareness becomes conditioned to return to the same place. Even when you try to focus elsewhere, it becomes less of a choice and more of an automatic response. And this is where the costs become deeply personal, because what you are losing is not just time or energy, but connection to yourself. Your ability to be fully present, to think freely, to direct your attention intentionally begins to weaken. You become a participant in your own patterns rather than the observer of them. All of this happens quietly, without a clear moment of realization, as your mind continues to circle around something that no longer exists in the way it once did, while your life continues forward without your full awareness engaged within it. There comes a moment, often subtle and unannounced, when you begin to realize that your inner world no longer feels entirely like your own. Your thoughts return to the same person, the same memories, the same emotional patterns, as if something within you has been quietly taken over. And in that realization, a deeper awareness begins to emerge, one that does not ask how this happened, but whether you are willing to take it back. Reclaiming your inner world does not begin with force. It does not come from trying to suppress thoughts or erase memories. The mind does not respond well to resistance. The more you try to push something away, the more persistent it often becomes. Instead, reclaiming begins with awareness, clear, honest recognition of what is happening within you. You start to notice the patterns. You see how often your thoughts drift in a particular direction. You become aware of the emotional pull that brings you back again and again to the same mental space. You observe without immediately reacting, without getting pulled into the story. And in that observation, a small but significant distance is created between you and your thoughts. This distance is where your power begins to return, because for the first time, you are no longer completely identified with what is happening in your mind. You are seeing it rather than being consumed by it. The thoughts may still appear, the memories may still surface, but they no longer carry the same automatic authority over your attention. Reclaiming your inner world also requires honesty, not about the other person, but about yourself. You begin to ask deeper questions, not to analyze them, but to understand your own attachment. What did this experience awaken in you? What need did it touch? What part of your identity became connected to it? These questions shift the focus inward. Instead of trying to solve the external situation, you begin to explore the internal one. You recognize that what holds your attention is not just the person, but what they came to represent. And once you see that clearly, something begins to loosen, because what is yours can be reclaimed. The emotions, the qualities, the sense of meaning you attach to them, all of it originates within you. It may have been activated through the connection, but it does not belong to it. It is part of your own psychological landscape, waiting to be recognized as such. This realization changes the nature of your thoughts. They no longer feel like something pulling you outward, but something revealing something inward. Instead of chasing the memory, you begin to understand it. Instead of holding onto the image, you begin to see through it. And gradually, the intensity begins to fade, not because you forced it to disappear, but because it is no longer being reinforced in the same way. Your attention, which once fed the cycle of fixation, is now being redirected toward awareness. And attention is what gives thoughts their strength. As you reclaim that attention, you also reclaim your presence. You begin to notice the world around you with more clarity. Moments that once passed unnoticed start to feel more real. Your mind is no longer constantly pulled away, and in that stillness, a different kind of stability begins to form. It is quieter, less dramatic, less intense, but far more grounded. Reclaiming your inner world is not about becoming empty of thought. It is about becoming intentional with it. It is about recognizing that your mind is not meant to be occupied by repetition, but engaged with awareness. There is also a sense of responsibility that comes with this process. Because once you see how your inner world can be shaped, influenced, and even overtaken, you begin to understand that it requires care, not control, but conscious direction, not suppression, but understanding. You begin to choose where your attention goes, not perfectly, not instantly, but gradually. Each moment of awareness becomes a small act of reclaiming. Each time you notice the pull and return to yourself, you strengthen that sense of ownership. And slowly, what once felt occupied begins to feel open again. Your thoughts become less crowded, your emotions less entangled, your awareness less divided. There is more space, not because everything has been removed, but because nothing is being held onto in the same way. What remains is not absence, but clarity. A quiet sense that your inner world is no longer defined by something outside of you, but shaped by your own understanding, your own awareness, and your willingness to remain present within it.